Revelation.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. It is March 19th, Thursday. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Over 30 headlines to get through today. Top stories. Joe Kent, is he a patriot or a traitor? No one really seems to be sure. I think I got it figured out. Also, bunker busting anti-ship missiles in Iran. Is it possible? Have the missile launches from Iran, have they been attrited? Nobody seems to know for sure. And it doesn't seem like that's the case. Could this go on forever? We don't know. We're going to talk about the war and more headlines coming up right now. All right, we're going to start with the Associated Press. Iran intensifies attack on oil and gas facilities in the Gulf after Israeli strike on key gas field. So we're going to talk about this. This is obviously a big story because what it means is that the attack on oil production itself is intensifying, which was a part of a bad spiral that we don't want to get into. Bad enough that the Strait of Hormuz is closed, but attacking oil fields in Iran and Iran attacking oil fields in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, in Qatar, in the United Arab Emirates, so forth and so on, it is problematic for the world economy as a whole, for a world war. And we're going to talk about all of this coming up right now. Associated Press leads off its story by saying Iran intensified its attacks on oil and gas facilities around the Gulf on Thursday, dramatically raising the stakes in a war that is sending shockwaves throughout the global economy. The strikes, in retaliation for an Israeli attack on a key Iranian gas field, sent fuel prices soaring and risks drawing Iran Arab neighbors directly into the conflict. Tehran's targeting of energy production further stressed global supply already under pressure because of Iran's stranglehold on the Strait of Hormuz. The strategic waterway through which a fifth of the world's oil is transported. Underscoring the danger to ships in the region, a vessel was set ablaze off the coast of the United Arab Emirates, and another damaged. Iran intensified its attacks on oil and gas facilities around the Gulf on Thursday, dramatically raising the stakes in a war that is sending shockwaves throughout the global economy. There was a little technical difficulty as per usual. I had a window closed and it opened by itself there. So I'm just going to get back on with the story here. Fails. So I wasn't aware of this, obviously, that it's underscoring the danger to ships in the region. A vessel was set off ablaze off the coast of the United Arab Emirates and another damaged off Qatar. But efforts to bypass the strait were also under pressure. An Iranian drone hit a Saudi refinery on the Red Sea, which is not the Persian Gulf, which the country has been hoping to use as an alternative exit route for its oil. So they're attacking not just shipping in the general area of oil shipments in the general area of the Persian Gulf, which ideally, depending on your point of view, might be their right because they border one half of the Persian Gulf. They're not even close to the Red Sea, so attacking oil there is certainly problematic. It's part of their military strategy. Iran's strategy is a war with the existing system, with the West, with any Arab nations that have agreements with the United States or Israel, whatever. It's a attack all type scenario, which has always been problematic and has acted really as a deterrent. A lot of this has acted as a deterrent for us or anyone else attacking Iran. Brent crude oil, the international standard, spiked to as high as $118 per barrel. Also going on with the story here, Reuters exclusive U.S. weighs military reinforcement as Iran war enters a possible new phase. President Donald Trump's administration is considering deploying thousands of U.S. troops to reinforce its operation in the Middle East as the U.S. military prepares for a possible next step in its campaign against Iran, and U.S. officials said a U.S. official. So it's, again, this is Reuters, not quoting people. This is obviously disturbing because everybody's afraid of boots on the ground, dead American service people coming home. That would be disastrous. I had never agreed with this war. My whole thing with this attack is, as most people had said and heightened their concerns and addressed the United States administration with their concerns about exactly what is happening here. Of course, they would. Mainly because of the risk involved in this difficult situation here. It's an intractable situation. You can't, if you look at the geography, the topography of Iran, their 40-something years of military buildup, digging tunnels to put their missiles in, and that's why their missiles can't be attrited, because they're stored in caves and tunnels all along the Persian Gulf. The Trump administration has also discussed options to send ground forces to Iran's Karg Island, the hub for 90% of Iran's oil exports, to three people familiar with the matter, and three U.S. officials say. This isn't going to happen for the simple reason is we're not going to risk U.S. ground troops in an effort to save oil infrastructure for the Iranian people. So to benefit the Iranian people, should the regime ever be dislodged. It's just not going to happen. We could just destroy it. But the problem is we want to do what's right for the American people, at least on the surface. Article number 3, the war zone. U.S. used its new 5,000-pound bunker busters to hit Iranian anti-ship missile sites. The U.S. Air Force is now reportedly dropping its new bunker buster bomb, the 5,000-pound class GBU-72B, on targets in Iran. The bombs are said to have been used in strikes on hardened Iranian anti-ship cruise missile sites along the highly strategic Strait of Hormuz overnight. There are also reports that this is the first time the GBU-72Bs have been used in combat, but it's not clear if this is the case. So two things I want to talk about just briefly: telegraphing the use of ground troops, and also telegraphing bunker bustings, which is less consequential. This is something I've been clamoring for from the beginning. And this has to be a multi-week phase dependent on how effective these bunker busters are. The reason Iran keeps shooting missiles is they have them in hardened cave tunnels and mountains, and there are mountains all over Iran, and probably some in very remote areas. Now, we could detect where the missiles launch from, but by the time we target it, the launchers are back in the caves. So they have, they have strategized over this for some time. Going back to the story here, hours ago, U.S. forces successfully employed multiple 5,000-pound deep penetrator munitions on hardened Iranian missile sites along Iran's coastline near the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian anti-ship cruise missiles in these sites pose a risk to international shipping in the strait, of course. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the anti-ship cruise missiles that were built in China. And the big fear was, and I keep reiterating this, was the fact that China had planned to send Iran even more sophisticated anti-ship missiles. I think you could look it up online last time I looked. There's several generations back of what China possesses, but China was going to upgrade. And if they did successfully upgrade these cruise missiles, it would give them such a range that it would push any aircraft carriers out of striking range of Iran. Thousands of miles into the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean. Regardless of the munitions used, U.S. strikes targeting Iranian anti-ship cruise missile sites on the edge of Strait of Hormuz speaks to the effort now to reopen that critical waterway to regulate maritime traffic. So far, we have not seen any clear evidence of Iran using its arsenal. And listen to this. So far, we have not seen any clear evidence of Iran using its arsenal of thousands of anti-ship cruise missiles, which would turn the strait into a super weapons engagement zone. Many of these missiles can also be launched from the backs of trucks that are hard to distinguish from civilian types. Yes, no, otherwise. The point is the same thing with the ballistic missiles, is that the launchers can move out of hardened locations in the mountains and then move back. And if you know anything about the topography of Iran, it's full of mountains. And that's where they store their nuclear research facilities, enrichment facilities, so on and so forth. Excuse me. Also, I want to appreciate you. Right now, I had to take the day yesterday. I had a job. Money comes before the episodes here. If I were ever to get paid doing this, things would change. But, I have to take advantage of good paying gigs. Further uptick in strikes on Iranian targets along the Strait of Hormuz, including deeply buried and hardened sites that could necessitate the use of GBU-72Bs, may now be on the horizon. And that's kind of how they close out this story. The actuality is that this is the case in point in the conflict. Nothing else matters. All right. They're not fully enriched. They don't have fully enriched uranium. They're not ready to make a nuclear device. They could possibly in weeks, months. The real case here is closing the Strait of Hormuz, the harassment, obviously, of other Gulf neighbors by the Iranians, but the anti-ship cruise missiles that could sink tankers, effectively closing the Strait of Hormuz. Mines are of a concern, not nearly as a concern as these anti-ship missiles, thousands, according to Reuters. And that would certainly strike and could possibly sink U.S. naval vessels if they dared to enter the Persian Gulf to escort tankers or whatever, or to bring in amphibious assault to Karg Island or what have you. Realistically, that would be an airborne thing. And they're not going to, and I don't know why they're telegraphing things, because we have a problem with information. We're getting information that isn't necessarily accurate. And then we're getting things that are obfuscated, like this next article, the Boston Herald, USS Gerald R. Ford involved in Iran fight heads back to port after fire. The Gerald Ford aircraft carrier is leaving the fight with Iran and heading back to port, a U.S. Official familiar with the matter says, after a fire broke out in its launcher area and left at least 2 sailors with non-life-threatening injuries. The Ford will travel from its current location in the Red Sea to Ceuta Bay on the Greek island of Crete, according to the official, who asked not to be identified, obviously, because the movements that aren't public. The ship had stopped at Ceuta Bay in late February on its way to the Red Sea. Spokesman for the U.S. Navy declined to comment on the carrier's condition or whether the guided missile destroyer that accompanied the Ford will stay on in the region. Defense official, who also asked not to be identified, said the Ford carrier group will continue to operate in the Red Sea. Ford's carrier group. So aircraft carrier groups are naval strike forces with additional ships, missile cruisers, etc. So the Ford may be going in for repairs. Now, there were reports, unconfirmed obviously, that this fire was set intentionally, or that could have very possibly been an act of terrorism or a bomb or something like that. That's obviously unconfirmed. We didn't know about this fire for days. The Iranians are saying that they struck the ship in an attack, possibly with a drone or what have you. That could very well be true. We're not going to get connect. If you're believing information coming out of the Pentagon, you shouldn't, because they're going to paint a rosy picture no matter what's happening. Obviously, it's part of psy warfare, psyops. It's part of propaganda effort. It's not unusual. We shouldn't be cursing the United States government for trying to put out a positive message, maybe, what have you. This also brings into focus the KC-135 tankers. One American News has the headline, Trump attends dignified transfer of 6 U.S. service members killed in KC-135 crash in Iraq. Now, these airmen were killed, and what it was billed as a crash, a mid-air crash between 2 tankers. Now, sometimes there are crashes, mid-air crashes between a tanker and the airplane they're trying to refuel, because they're in very close proximity. And given wind conditions, turbulence and stuff, it could be treacherous. But, and again, the Iranian militias in Iraq claimed responsibility for downing the plane. Again, as I said the day before yesterday, we don't know necessarily, or we might not ever know, the true details, causes for both the crash of the KC-135 and the fire on the USS Gerald Ford. Speaking of propaganda and the message on the home front, the New York Post has the headline, Republicans overwhelmingly back Trump over Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly on Iran war, a poll finds. I am one Republican who is against the attack. The difference with me is I'm not an activist. So I have my personal opinion, I have my political opinion that this was an unwise move, but I'm not privy to all the intelligence either. Which brings me to confess that I'm against the war, just like I'm against abortion, but I don't think that outlawing abortion is a good public policy, because there are people that don't believe as I do, and that I'd rather them take a pill or have a medical abortion in a hospital or a medical clinic instead of going into a back alley and ripping out their fetus with a coat hanger. Um, but I digress. The issue here is attack on Iran. I think it was foolish because it is way more difficult than Vietnam. Uh, it's the same topography as Afghanistan, except the Iranians have a bigger army, have more armaments. You know, it's a quagmire. It could be a quagmire. The reason that you get so much support for it, or not as much dissent as one would think, is because that it's still an air war. And the American public is pretty, I don't know, indifferent about bombing campaigns than they are against soldiers be putting in harm's way. Because technically, well, they wouldn't be indifferent also if pilots were shot down. But that hasn't been the case. You did have that Air Force tanker crash, but that's not the same as fighter pilots getting shot down, because fighter pilots are almost worth more than the planes they fly. We did lose some fighter jets in the beginning. We didn't lose the pilots. The Kuwait mistakenly shot them down. But let's get back to what we were talking about. Story number 7, Fox News. Former counter-terrorism chief Joe Kent under FBI investigation for alleged classified leaks. The probe predates Kent's departure from government, according to sources familiar. I don't know if that's true. The FBI is investigating former National Counter-Terrorism Center director Joe Kent after allegations he leaked classified information, according to 3 sources familiar with it. Do we go with any named sources anymore? I know it's hard when you're covering a war and talking to the Defense Department, because then you wouldn't get any information if those sources were made publicly. But now it's you can't find sources in stories. It's always people familiar with the matter, and I don't think that's appropriate in journalism. As Ben Bradley famously said during the Watergate investigation, isn't anybody going to go on the goddamn record for this story? Just the news. Iran attacks Qatar energy facility, threatens other strikes in the region. You know, I just want to go back briefly to Joe Kent. I made this comment earlier online because people were getting on Tulsi Gabbard. She should just resign and save face or whatever. Tulsi Gabbard works for the administration. You work for the commander-in-chief. So you have to do what the commander-in-chief wants you to do. And if the commander-in-chief makes a decision, you have to abide by that decision and do what is necessary to bolster the administration and the efforts the administration is making in any sector, defense, economy, what have you. So Joe Kent didn't feel comfortable doing that, and he resigned, which is his right, and because he wanted to express his dissent, which is also okay. But apparently they're looking into whether or not, when he was on Tucker Carlson yesterday, whether he revealed any classified information. I mean, because you know Iranian intelligence and Chinese and Russian intelligence is listening to Joe Kent and what he might divulge. Okay, back to the story. Iran attacks Qatar energy facility, threatens other strikes in the region. Iran bombed a major Qatari oil processing plant and threatened to further damage energy facilities in the Gulf states in retaliation for Israeli attack on its largest gas field. The tit-for-tat attacks are already sent volatile energy prices surging again, though they did not reach the highs seen during the first days of the U.S.-led attack on Iran. After the attack on the facilities in Qatar, Iran's Revolutionary Guard threatened additional attacks on facilities in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. All 3 countries host U.S. military bases on their soil. Military bases and their oil production facilities have helped compensate for a slowdown in production from the blocked Strait of Hormuz. particularly Saudi Arabia, because they have pipelines to the Red Sea that were subsidized, mind you, by the United States. Wall Street Journal, how China is quietly helping an isolated Iran survive from buying its oil to sell. Look at the second part. From buying oil to selling rocket parts, China gives Iran critical support. Selling rocket parts. Because they don't tell anyone communist China is selling missiles and rockets to Iran. That could cause a third world war. Basically, what they do is they have Chinese agents in Iran. They do this all over the place. So they sell the rocket and missile parts to Iran, and then they have Chinese people directing the Iranians on how to build the missiles and rockets. And this is what I try to tell people, and you know, that I comment on, whether it's regarding Joe Cannon and Tucker Carlson or anything else in this subject matter, is nobody's talking about the anti-ship cruise missiles, right? Except for Warzone or whatever. Nobody's talking about, why aren't they talking about that? Because they don't want to widen the war. Why would that widen the war? Because if you talk about anti-ship missiles, you have to talk about how they got them and what the case was behind attacking them now, and whether or not more advanced missiles are en route to Iran as we speak. We don't know. There was discussion, it was in the press, and I mentioned this too. Was this Israeli disinformation putting these stories in the press that China is selling advanced anti-ship cruise missiles to Iran that have a range of over 2,000 miles? Maybe Israel did that. I wouldn't put it past them. Mossad is very effective. And you think Operation Mockingbird is, you know, a significant operation here in the United States. Just what do you think the Mossad is doing globally as far as, you know, when they have agents, just like the CIA has agents in media, you don't think the Chinese have agents? The Israelis have agents in global media? Just think about that for a second. Just the news again, China approaches Taiwan with an offer reunification in exchange for energy independence. China made an offer to Taiwan Wednesday to provide the island nation with energy stability in exchange for reunification, which has long been the communist regime's goal, and Taiwan is always rejected. But Taiwan, which has been receiving a third of its LNG from Qatar and gets no energy from China, has now said it's fine for now, with the United States as the island's main international backer. I kind of find this funny because this story says a lot. Says a lot about China's mindset now, which, if they're trying to make a deal with Taiwan, that means the military option may be, I don't want to say off the table, may be impossible now with because they know they're weak in the energy sphere, right? So if they ever went to war with America, the first thing we do is cut off their oil. And they have the only way I believe there is a small pipeline from Russia, but couldn't handle their capacity, especially for war. China has long offered Taiwan one country, two systems, like Hong Kong. If it agrees to be brought under Beijing's control, China has long threatened to reunify Taiwan one way or another, never having renounced the use of force to achieve its goal. But like I said, Without the free flow of oil to power war, that could be impossible. That's one of their weakness. And that's what, Trump is, they always say, oh, Trump's playing 3D chess. He's taken into account the future, a future war with China and how we would be victorious. And this is one of the ways, is getting Iran unyoked from China. And Iran would never do that as long as they're at perpetual war with the United States and the West. And that means dislodging the Islamic regime. Speaking of war with China, there's another concern here. Washington Post: drones over base, military base, where Rubio Hegseth live raises concerns. U.S. officials detected unidentified drones above the Washington Army base where Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth live. According to the three people briefed on the situation, officials have not determined where they came from. Again, officials familiar with the matter. The military is monitoring potential threats more closely of the heightened alert level of the United States and Israel strike Iran, according to a senior administration official who spoke on the condition of anonymity. To discuss sensitive security matters, multiple drones were spotted over Fort Leslie McNair on a single night in the last 10 days, prompting increased security measures and a meeting at the White House to discuss how to respond. So this is China, if you didn't know. It's BRICS. So BRICS is sort of a military alliance. It's, if there's going to be a new world war, it's going to be BRICS versus the West. But this is, if you don't think as this military action progresses that China and Russia aren't running full war scenarios, full war scenario drills, World War scenario drills, like flying drones, getting intelligence. Who knows what kind of intelligence capabilities these drones have, listening devices, what have you. Maybe the drones were there to plant listening devices. Maybe they were doing targeting information. Maybe if, Israel keeps going after the Iranian leadership, maybe in a new war that's immediately because your enemy is going to mimic what you do. We read about that just briefly. It's called a tit for tat kind of deal. So they're going to mimic so if you start taking out assassinating leadership, well, they're going to do the same. So obviously one of the targets would be Secretary of State Marco Rubio, because if you didn't know, Secretary of State, the State Department runs the CIA. Getting back to the war, zero hedge, WTI Brent spread explodes as Trump mulls export ban. Iran's attack on Qatar LNG worse than Nord Stream. Indeed, it is. WTI Brent spread blows out as traders price the U.S. export restrictions. Iran targets Qatar LNG plant, Saudi Red Sea refinery. Trump urges de-escalation after Iranian strikes on Qatari energy assets. He indeed asked Israel, because this was a response. It's called escalation ladder, which is a little different than tit for tat or mimics. But there's an escalation ladder involved in that. But Israel struck Iranians' biggest gas field, and Trump chimed in and said, "We're going to blow it up too if you don't watch out." So he's trying to use rhetoric to get, but at the same time ask for restraint on attacking energy infrastructure. And this is the problem with conflicts, period. There's something called the escalation ladder, which means a war starts very limited, and the next thing you know, in 2 months, it's a nuclear war. Middle East conflict escalates dangerously overnight into direct strikes on upstream energy assets. They mean upstream from shipping. Yeah, and that's why it's not, there's a great concern here for nuclear war. And everybody said so. You want to start this conflict, where's it going to end up? And then they have a graph here, AAA national average, a regular gas price change, 1 month percent. You see it going up and down. And it's like surging now. New York Post, Federal Reserve holds interest rates steady amid Iran war, mixed economic signals. Indeed, this is an issue because unemployment is down, despite there's no job creation. Unemployment is still low, and so is inflation. So those are the mixed signals, because usually when inflation is down, unemployment is up, and vice versa. New York Post goes on to say the central bank, which voted 11-1 to keep interest rates between 3.5 and 3.75, nodded to uncertainty around the Middle East conflict, with Powell joking that if there were a meeting to skip economic projections, this would be a good one because we just don't know. And they're looking at the factor of the Iran war, and as we talked about, escalation ladder. Associated Press, Fed keeps key rate unchanged as Powell vows to stay in office until DOJ investigation is finished and there's a law concerning this. That's weird. Issue with a slide. So Powell did clarify a key question about the Fed's future. He said that he has no intention of leaving the central bank until an investigation into his congressional testimony about the Fed's building renovation is dropped. Okay, so if you didn't know what was happening, so the Trump administration, the DOJ was investigating Jerome Powell, and they wanted to bring charges against him. They really wanted to force him out, but he's out anyway. So he's gonna, as soon as he's replaced, he's going to step down. But the law is, if someone is, or particularly I believe to the Fed board, if someone is in investigation for wrongdoing on the Fed board or as the Fed chair, they can't be out of office. They can't leave office. So it's not his intention to stay, as long as there is an open investigation into Jerome Powell and his perjury, basically, for his testimony regarding the renovations of the new Fed building. Zero hedge, no hire, no fire economy rolls on with jobless claims back near record lows. The number of Americans filing for jobless benefits for the first time fell to just 205,000 this week, or actually last week. Continuing, the jobless claims also remain below the 1.9 million Maginot line, showing no sign of increasing layoffs. So there's been a lot of talk about layoffs, and I think they're basically projections for stock price, because there will be massive layoffs. But they don't want to kill their stock price, because usually layoffs are a sign of the company doing badly. But in the case of AI, that won't be the case. It'll just be like in the 19th century, when they got rid of slavery for financial reasons. Everyone became a debt slave. So it wasn't that Africans were necessarily freed. It was as if everyone, including blacks, were going under a new debt slave system. It's feudal in a sense, and I'll get into that, but I don't want to take too much time. Post-millennial, far left Kat Abu-Ghazaleh loses Illinois Democratic House primary after arrest for anti-ICE violence. The former mediaite activist, Gen Z, progressive activists, she allegedly attacked an immigration and customs enforcement vehicle outside a detention center. And so she did that. She's another freak. If you're a right-wing billionaire or a member of the Democratic consultant class, this campaign isn't for you. Well, that's probably why she didn't win. And there's more. Post-millennial trans teacher launches. These people need to go. I'm sorry. These people need to go to get serious psychiatric help. Well, but it's probably the psychologists, the therapists, the psychiatrists that got them into the place they are. So I don't know. The best thing I would say to these people is you need to unplug. You need to separate yourself from your peer groups. Go somewhere by yourself and live for a while, and stay offline, because these people are becoming crazy. They're saying, oh, it's the internet is harmful for children. Really? Maybe they could become teachers. Post-millennial trans teacher launches GoFundMe to escape Florida crackdown on LGBTQ indoctrination in classrooms. So Rise Stone, 32 of Orlando, expressed irritation that he, who is posing as a woman, he's a trans person, has to self-police himself in the classroom or risk losing his teacher's license. My partner and I are trying to raise funds to get out of Florida this summer. I'm a trans woman and a lesbian, but I'm also a public school teacher in Orlando. I have had indignity upon indignity heaped upon me and had more and more of my autonomy as an educator stripped away. You're not allowed to tell children, impressionable children. I mean, this is a high school. All right, so let's just be fair and objective here. However, tell children about your gayness, transness, whatever. You teach English and history, then teach English and history, not through the lens of a trans lesbian, but as objective truth. Objective truth. Which increase you want to change the history book and say 1619 this and that happened. Well, you better come with evidence, because we're an evidence-based, merit-based, objective-based system. Because most science is objective. All right, blathering on. I got to go. Got to get on the road here. Article number 18, The Federalist, how a Minnesota teachers union funnels support to front group fighting to abolish ICE and prisons. Minneapolis Families for Public Schools, reportedly an initiative of Take Action Minnesota, helps organize Rapid Response Network and ICE Watch, centered around neighborhoods and schools. According to these documents, while TAM has partnered with other radical left groups in events that involve student walkouts and backed other leftist activism at school. Of course, I mean, the teachers union continue to prove they are rotten apples that only care about far left street activism to the detriment of educating children. And that's the big, and I don't want to go too long on this, but that's the whole point of the demonization of Trump and using Trump as a foil in a psyop, is that you can get people to do anything, to go against what they believed in all their lives, as long as it's going against Trump. Because Trump is the big villain. He's bringing all these bad things, authoritarianism and, deporting your neighbors. Post-millennial breaking, FBI, IRS to investigate NGOs for ties to domestic terrorism. Well, they can also investigate maybe this teachers union. Is it an NGO? I don't think unions are NGOs because they make money. I don't know, maybe. The initiative to create Mission Control Commander Center based at the FBI, where agents at IRS criminal investigations can work to uncover this Attorney General Pam Bondi in December ordered federal agencies and prosecutors prioritize to investigate extremist groups such as Antifa. These domestic terrorists use violence. Now, this is true, so listen to this. These domestic terrorists use violence or the threat of violence to advance political and social agendas, just like the Federalists said there. They're not concerned with teaching, they're concerned with creating little leftists. So she goes on, social and political agendas, including opposition to law and immigration enforcement, extreme views in favor of mass migration and open borders, all illicit, adherence to racial, gender, and ideology, anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, and anti-Christianity. And all these activists are all that. They're far left radicals, and they don't even know they're radicals. They might not even have read Marx, but they like animals, which is great, admirable, obviously. But they also take that compassion to feel like every human is a dependent, that without your support as an ally, how would they ever survive? Which is kind of patronizing to begin with. Want to get into some voter news. The Federalist, 22 times Democrats invited non-citizens to vote in U.S. elections, and they don't really name 22 episodes, but what they do here is frame this very nicely. Senator Alex Padilla said non-citizen voting in federal elections is already a felony, and he sounds very much like Maggie Brennan, who goes on to say that we don't have to have enforcement. It's already against the law. But as I often say, a law without enforcement is no law at all. He says it's already a felony and that the legislation is a misguided solution in search of a problem that doesn't exist. And we're going to find out how that's not true. The Save America Act is a solution, in search of a problem, the statement said, and shared by Dick Durbin. New York City Democrats fought to permit 800,000 non-citizens to vote in municipal elections, which include the races for election, council member, borough president, comptroller, and advocate. And I went over, it was 2 days ago, I went over a couple articles where individuals had voted, that are here legally, had voted many, many times in federal elections. It's happening. And they just say, oh, it's in search of a problem. There's not a problem. If we came up with no one, then you could say it's not a problem. But where there are few, there could be many. Next up, Fox News, GOP overperforms in Virginia. Some good news. Virginia had a special election, and the GOP overperformance is fueling early momentum talk in blue trending state. Andrew Rice defeated a Democrat by 25 points to hold on to a delegate seat in Virginia. A Republican running in the Virginia special election significantly outperformed expectations Tuesday night, sparking chatter on social media that Republicans could have momentum in the blue trending state where Democratic Governor Abigail Spanberger has faced backlash for her progressive agenda since taking office. Yeah, duh. I mean, even Democrats were surprised, moderate Democrats were surprised that when she came into office, elected again as a moderate, took office and then went far left. She supported every cockamamie scheme that the Democrat Party wants to push. And people have to understand the Democrat Party might as well be the Socialist Party. Exactly what they're doing is forwarding a socialist, progressive, radical agenda. There's no place for moderates like John Fetterman in the current Democratic Party. Anyway, the story goes on to say, in the race to replace Republican Virginia House District 98 delegate Barry Knight, who died of cancer last month, Andrew Rice has defeated Democrat Cheryl Smith by 25 points in a climate where voters in the Commonwealth have been turning to Democrats in recent turning to Democrats in recent elections. Conservatives on social media were quick to point out that Rice, who despite holding on to a Republican seat, outperformed the candidate for Republican governor, Winsome Earl Sears, in November and outperformed President Donald Trump's 2024 total by 10 points, sparking belief in possible GOP momentum and backlash towards Spanberger. And as I said, she's a CIA agent, and if you didn't know, the CIA was communist. You didn't know. They like every extreme brainwashing type of political ideology or religion that you could get into. I mean, John Brennan converted to Islam, I think for that specific reason. Because they're all into the CIA is all into mind war. It's all about state of mind, how you think. And then by using that, getting people to do things. So it's mind control. CIA is all about mind control. They mind control their own agents to get them to do things or to go against their better judgment, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The AMAC, a rigged election by any other name in Virginia. So this is going back to the redistricting bullshit. Here I'm showing a district map of Virginia. Look at how that long Democratic, that recently Democrat, sort of purpley, District 6 there. Look at that leg going way into a red district. Back in 2020, Virginia voters went to the polls and chose, just like California, chose to take redistricting out of the hands of politicians by supporting constitutional amendment, creating the Virginia Redistricting Commission. And that's what I support. And reasonable, objective people would always support, once and for all, having a either bipartisan or a nonpartisan commission to decide redistricting. Because redistricting is in the Constitution. You could do it, and people want to do it for a variety of different reasons. Not going to get into that here. The amendment passed with 65% support. No shit, just like the one in California. It won majority support in every county except for one. But Democrats are now attempting to ram through an amendment to the Virginia Constitution that would abolish the VRC and create a map that would almost certainly result in a 10-1 Democratic advantage. That's just what happened in California. And they had a referendum that was suspect. Because if you have a supermajority, you not only court and raise votes, manufacture votes, but you're also counting the votes if you're in the Democratic Party. So you always win. That's a problem as a supermajority. Even if the public, the electorate's attitudes change, the party doesn't change. A majority of voters, they go on to say, must approve the amendment, reversing course from just 6 years ago in a ballot referendum. Imagine that. So what happened is they got rid of the bipartisan districting committee, and then surprise, who got rid of it? Who got rid of it? The Democrats. So the Democrats get rid of the bipartisan or nonpartisan redistricting. That seems fair to everybody. And they go to redistrict. What do? On racial lines. The Federalist, thousands of non-citizens on voter rolls in one county underscore need for SAVE Act. You believe that? This was another Federalist article where Democrats said it's a non-existing problem. And now you have this. The Federalist, thousands of non-citizens on voter rolls in one county underscore the need for the SAVE Act. So Dick Durbin was wrong. In a Fairfax County, Virginia, election officials quietly removed non-citizens from the voter rolls almost every month. In the past 4 years alone, the county has canceled 1,912 voter registrations belonging to individuals who have identified themselves as non-citizens. None were discovered through a verification system. They surfaced only when the registrants voluntarily disclosed their status, which means more than likely they were apprehended for being illegal. And the first question out of the investigator's mouth is, did you ever vote? Oh, yes, sir. And as I say, right? If there were few, there could be many. And that's just the tip of the iceberg because that's only using one avenue to discover the illegal registrants. The other would be obviously to go through the voter roll and make sure everybody's a citizen. Just the news, as reliability concerns grow, Democrats signal retreat from previous push to 100% renewable energy. Everybody knows this. We've known this for years. I like renewables. They're just not to power what we have today. Since 2019, nearly 24 states, most of them blue states, have vowed to transition their grids to run without generators powered by fossil fuels within the next 24 years. But while Democrats have often been vocal supporters of these efforts, President Donald Trump's energy policies have produced a direct challenge to net zero plans. Outside the political sphere, independent assessments find that the nation's grid is becoming increasingly fragile, primarily a direct result of the over-reliance on weather-dependent renewables. We saw that in the storm Fern, I think it was in Texas, that ice storm where it froze the wind. And so everybody was not only freezing cold, but then they were out of electricity. Fossil fuels are the way to go. If you find something that's better, fine. I don't agree with fission nuclear fusion, sure, and that's what we're going for. A lot of people say that we already have the technology, but just aren't employing it. Who knows? BJ Media, Hochul's demand that rich New Yorkers return and cut meat shakes for the welfare is tone deaf. So if you didn't hear this story, this is kind of a good one. So Hochul went on the talk circuit and demand rich former New Yorkers who fled to Florida, Palm Beach predominantly, come back and pay the New York tax. Can't. What did Margaret Thatcher say about socialism? You eventually run out of other people's money. Also, Jamie Lee Curtis, this is Fox News, slams abomination Trump for trying to erase diversity from our language. It's so ridiculous. She said more people of color are getting appreciation. More genders are being appreciated. Diversity, inclusivity, the words that Donald Trump is trying to erase from our language is an abomination. And it's fantastic. She was mixing up her points there. She had to get that dig into Donald Trump. And I'm always, and it's literal, right? Donald Trump is trying to erase from our language inclusivity and diversity. No, he's not. Just like me, I'm multi-culti. But there's a difference between appreciating something and letting it roll all over you. I appreciate things on an equal, my life's about balance. I appreciate things on an equal level, right? And that's really where you get joy out of life, out of everything, not just the things you like, but joy out of life, out of everything. All right, Fox News. Sorry about that. Fox News, John Fetterman says Trump derangement syndrome is the leader of the Democratic Party. Pennsylvania senator recently cheered President Trump's strike on Iran. It's funny because it goes back to Jamie Lee Curtis there. It's truly Trump derangement syndrome. They don't have anybody. Fetterman went on to say, oh, we don't have anybody. I think the Trump derangement syndrome, that I think that's the leader right now. You know, right now our party is governed by TDS. And now it's made virtually impossible without being punished as a Democrat to agree with something good or I agree with the other side. Yeah, you can't. Anything Trump does, it's that old joke, if Trump cured cancer, the Democrats would be against it. It's what Fetterman's trying to say is that's not a political strategy. It's not a campaign strategy. That didn't work last time, to be honest with you. You know, not Trump, anybody but Trump, anybody but Kamala Harris. All right, U.S. national debt breaches 39 trillion milestone for first time amid spending surge. National debt surpassed 39 trillion for the first week, just 5 months after hitting 38 trillion, and it's going to accelerate. And there's another thing with this war that people are not considering. No one's talking about a way to boost the economy is to borrow more money. Otherwise, collapse. So are you getting more in debt or you're collapsing? That's why we are where we are. And I'm not for debt. Absolutely not. I think we should be spending down the debt. I think we should figure out something. And I think Trump was trying to do that. The only way is really self-reliance and conservatism, really. And that's what conservatism means. Stop spending money. You're never going to fix your debt issue if you don't stop spending money. But you can't do that when there's a war, yada, yada, yada. You know the drill. Just the news, U.S. House tanks balanced budget amendment as national debt tops 39 trillion. The U.S. House tanked a balanced budget resolution to curb the federal government's practice on racking up trillion-dollar deficits every year. The failed Wednesday vote comes as federal spending pushed the national debt over 39 trillion, roughly 3 trillion higher than it was 12 months ago. Oops. 12 months ago. Yep. I told you Trump is not a conservative. I voted for Trump. I like what Trump, but Trump is not a conservative. You needed people like Thomas Massie to rein Trump in on spending. You needed Musk and Doge to do that. You also Rand Paul, real true conservatives that don't want to spend money, over nothing. But war changes that. Not that Rand Paul is for the war, but you know what I mean. Independent, chaos in Florida for spring breaks as takeovers overwhelm beaches and law enforcement. I just quickly wanted to say one thing on takeovers. I can't stand this younger generation bullshit with the super loud cars and the ruckus behavior and street takeovers, all right? It's my right to drive down the fucking street that my tax dollars pay for. You're not, these young kids, you're not paying taxes. Maybe some car tax. You live in a blue state. But this is bullshit. If I want to go to wherever these kids were, I think Miami Beach, right? Is that what they take over? I've had street takeovers in my town, and not for nothing. I appreciate young people, but stop this shit, okay? The police have to stop it. Stop. I'm allowed to go to work. I'm allowed to go. If I want to go out to dinner with my wife and shit, I shouldn't have the street blocked for no good reason, right? You'd block the street if there was an emergency, not just for fun. I'm sorry. Driving to the edge here, One American News, Florida Pulse nightclub demolished a constructed memorial for victims of the 2016 shooting. Nearly a decade after the tragedy, the Pulse nightclub building in Orlando was demolished on Wednesday to clear the way for a permanent memorial honoring the 49 victims of the 2016 mass shooting. By a Muslim terrorist. He did it because he was Muslim and because they were homosexual. And they went on to say that that was the biggest mass shooting death toll until Las Vegas. The shooter's name was Omar Mateen, 29, a U.S. citizen who was raised Muslim. People are fucked up. Seriously, because people have issue. There was even that one guy down south that he went up and shot massage parlors because he went to them and he felt guilty about it because he was really Christian or whatever. One American News, Patel, FBI season of fentanyl to kill 178 million Americans in 2025. I guess that's good. I don't care, especially fentanyl, just don't, we should just legalize marijuana nationally or leave it to the states, but kind of what we do. Financial Times, 2 shipments of Russian oil and gas head to Cuba in defiance of U.S. First cargo on course to arrive on Monday as Donald Trump taunts communist island while administration engages in talks. This is also a problem area. What are you going to do when the oil shipments get there? Are you going to blockade Cuba? So Russia is taking advantage of this fraught political time. 2 vessels heading for energy-starved Cuba carrying Russian oil. They're going to arrive Monday. The island that was plunged into a nationwide blackout when its entire grid collapsed. So the Hong Kong flagged Seahorse, carrying some 27,000 tons of Russian gas, was headed towards the island. You said 2 vessels. What's the other one? Not important. How did we do on time? So it was 32 stories in an hour, 6 minutes. All right, did pretty good there, I think. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the live stream. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. Stay hip to the trick. I'm here every day, Monday through Friday, most days at 10 a.m. or thereabouts. On Rumble, YouTube, X, BitChute. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great night. Respect.
American, I have rights.